What's happening, everybody? Robert Phoenix here. I'm not getting a clear signal to YouTube. Let's check that out. Let me just plug that in now. See what we got going on here. Going to my channel now. Going to my channel now. Oh yeah, I'm live now. How about that? There I am. YouTube did not make the connection. There's Ian. Where have I been? I've been sick. That's where I've been. It has not been a fun time trying to ditch this gnarly virus that decided to take a ride with me once I got to California. I caught the virus when I went to California. Doesn't that make sense? Makes total sense to me. So, hello everybody. Good morning. Getting back on the beat here. Gonna jump in and do about a 45-minute flame and sort of, get the chops back. Got to practice the skills. Anyway, well, it's good to be back. I've been trying to just recuperate on a physical level because it's been pretty just a kind of I had this intense virus, man, and it really culminated when I would say culminate, but it was really like kind of at another level when I was flying back to Austin and descending on 2 separate flights and coming down, this just intense pressure in my head and just like, my right ear was just felt like it was about to explode on a couple of occasions. But anyway, pretty much done with that, and it's time to get back on the ground, boots on the ground. There's a lot to talk about, a lot to cover. We're looking at a very busy end of 2019 as we hurtle into 2020. It is looking rather clouded, to say the least. I'm going to try to cut through some of the fog and bullshit and confusion today and address a few things and see if we can put the high beams on, get some clarity. And just ready to jump back in on the robertphoenix.com side of things. Reading sessions are all going to be taken off here. But man, I was just totally flattened and just getting back into the third dimensional body. Let's see who's in the chat today. Poor audio. Okay, hold on a second. Let me deal with that. Okay, here we go. I'm just using my built-in microphone now, probably a little bit better. You spend like $50 on a decent set of headphones with a USB mic, and hopefully you think that it would be an upgrade to your audio solution. Well, the answer obviously and apparently is no. So let me check back in with you guys and see how this is sounding. Now it's a little bit better. Let's see what you got. Are we better here on the audio side? Sound is fine now. Good. Have you tried colloidal silver? Yeah, I have tried colloidal silver, and I don't know. I maybe I'll do some now. Now that I'm trying to at the end of this thing. But I don't know if I've ever really found colloidal silver to be the panacea, like to clear it all out or prevent it. But I've got some, and thank you for the reminder. So I'll dose some today and try to just push this thing all the way out because I got too much to do to be on the sidelines. How is everybody? How are you doing? You know how I'm doing. How are you doing? Are you keeping it together? Weird times, right? These are very, very strange times. I've been avoiding the
the impeachment trial like a plague, because I just feel like I really don't want to give a lot of my emotional energy over to that absolute and utter circus and fiasco. But I happened to tune in yesterday as these so-called legal experts, these constitutional law experts, all supposedly from their very neutral third-party position, chimed in with their expert opinion around the case to both impeach and try one President Donald John Trump. And first, let me say that not only was I not impressed at the candidates that they brought up to essentially sell their case, with the exception of Jonathan Turley. Not only was I not impressed, but as a human, I was embarrassed. I was embarrassed by what I saw. And I could, you know, pin an American flag on my lapel, or I could pin an American flag on it and say, as an American, I was embarrassed. But what I saw yesterday transcended being an American. As a human, I was embarrassed by what I saw. These people were, I've never seen more compromised, more examples of compromised souls. And it was really shocking in some ways what I witnessed. I'll bring up the article so that way you guys can have some visual references and it can trigger my angst. And this is, I'm just going to use the BBC here. It's a BBC post, so you guys can see this, and you'll get to see the players, their faces, and I may refrain from playing any audio, although it probably wouldn't hurt. But so this is from the BBC. I'm just going to kind of go over this. Trump impeachment, 3 law experts tell committee he should be removed. There is no doubt that President Donald Trump's actions require him to be removed from office. 3 scholars of U.S. constitutional law have testified. Well, let's just break that sentence down. Just the construction of that sentence, where it is in journalism, this is called the lead paragraph. Okay, this is the lead paragraph. You know, I did study journalism. And in the lead paragraph, you have to have the 5 W's and the H, the what, the why, the when, the where, the 4 W's and the H. What, why, when, where, and how. So what are we talking about? We're talking about impeachment. Who, the 3 scholars. Is there a where? No. Is there a when? No. Is there a how? Sort of. But here we have this 2-sentence lead paragraph in boldface. And so if you were to just read this now on face value, you would say, okay, well, we have U.S. constitutional law, 3 scholars require him to be removed from office. There is no doubt. It doesn't take into account who they are, what their agenda is, and what their group or community or affiliation is as well. Let me just continue to read this. 3 experts describe Mr. Trump's efforts to solicit help from a foreign nation as a crime, and accused him of obstructing justice. 4 experts, 3 picked by the Democrats and 1 by the Republicans, have been testifying in Congress. The 4th said Mr. Trump's actions were wrong, but not impeachable. So in essence, the 4th individual, Jonathan Turley, is saying that Trump did not commit an impeachable offense. let's continue to read this. As the investigation entered a new phase, the experts testified to the House Judiciary Committee, which began hearings aimed at drawing up articles of impeachment. Its hearings come hot on the heels of the House Intelligence Committee's investigation, which concluded on Tuesday with a 300-page report accusing Mr. Trump of putting his own personal political interests above the national interests of the United States by soliciting foreign interference in the 2020 US elections. Okay, so what they're trying to do is they're trying to create another Watergate scenario. This is a page right out of Richard Nixon. If you look at what happened with Richard Nixon, is that Nixon was ordering the plumbers, who were guys like Haldeman and Hunt and Ehrlichman and all those cats, right? And he was ordering them to record conversations that were taking place at the Watergate Hotel. Now, that's why they call it Watergate. And Nixon was incredibly paranoid. And the reason why Nixon was paranoid was because Nixon knew that they wanted to get him out of office. Nixon knew what the landscape of Washington, D.C. was like. And so he wanted to be informed of whatever kind of plot or whatever kind of junta or agenda or coup would be in place in order to remove him from office. This is what Nixon was concerned about. And Nixon had concerns because he was on their list. And I talked about this before. And what Nixon did, where Nixon got in trouble, is he perjured himself and he lied about the recordings. He lied about the recordings. Now, here's where I think it gets very fuzzy. Let's take a look at these. Look at Nadler. Look at that sad sack motherfucker. I'm sorry. Look at that face. Just look at the face. Look at this is a miserable human being. He's just a miserable human being. There's no joy there. There's nothing there. The only joy that this man has is the joy that he gets out of basically taking his middle finger and shoving it into your metaphorical face every single day. That's the joy he gets. He gets his joy from darkness. He gets his joy from being able to create uneasy and unsettled emotions in people, to make people feel angry and anxious and frustrated and resentful. It's an anti-joy. And so when you have anti-joy, the smile lines go downwards. So I wanted to talk a little bit about this idea that the CIA can go out and the FBI can go out and the NSA can go out and they can use all of their tentacles in order to find information that theoretically may be a threat to the government or the system. And trust me, since the days of Nixon, it's become even worse because the spying tools and the spying apparatus and the software that are available to the intelligence agencies are mind-blowing. And they're not only working through their traditional sort of routes, but they've also subcontracted out to their partners like Facebook and Google and YouTube and Twitter. They're all their partners. And so they're grabbing information all the time, scraping information all the time. And so there's a 24/7 listening party happening, grabbing things like keywords, which that's been going on since the 90s. It's gotten even more sophisticated than that. And so if these branches of our so-called government, and they're not necessarily branches, but agencies and groups, if they've been given the power to collect data and to theoretically eavesdrop and spy upon the people of this country and the people of the world, then why shouldn't the executive office or the executive branch be granted the same powers? I mean, everybody else is doing it around them. Why not? And, is it any different than Obama? The only difference with Obama is that Obama went through those agencies. They filed all their little FISA warrants and had them rubber stamped. And so the system was set up, and the Obama administration used the system. The problem with Trump is that Trump has been trying to find out where the corruption is. Does Trump have any interest in Joe Biden as a potential threat to his candidacy? Well, sure he does. Would he benefit from getting information about Biden? No doubt. But would the country also benefit by understanding that there's corruption involved, and that there has been corruption involved, and that really what we're talking about here is a total win? Of course it would be. But that's not how it's being spun, not at all. It's not being spun that way at all. This is what really got me. Democrats' impeachment push is unpatriotic. But if you listen to them, if you listen to these people, and here they are, if you listen to these people, especially these three right here, what you're going to hear is that what they are doing is not only patriotic, but it is in the service of the founding fathers and the framers of the Constitution. And this is something that I've been hearing a lot lately. Now, all of a sudden, and we saw this, and I'm sorry, I just have to go through this today because there are things we just have to untangle so that we can have some clarity. But we began to see this when the likes of Comey and Peter Strzok and Lisa Page and all the supposed FBI / NSA / CIA people, because we know that Strzok goes back and forth. Strzok has a relationship with both the CIA and the FBI. And what we heard from them was that they were doing their constitutional duty, their constitutional right. They were all of a sudden now grabbing the mantle of patriotism and wrapping the flag around themselves in order to justify the fact that essentially they were spying on the president of the United States, that they were taking some higher moral ground, and that this is the justification for it. And really what they're doing is they're lying through their teeth. And they're essentially using something that is, in my estimation, although very flawed in terms of any kind of document or any kind of framework with which to have a government. It's probably about the only thing that we've had in the so-called modern era that has allowed for this system to exist in its own way for as long as it has, with all the attacks and all the abrogations to the Constitution that have taken place since then. And so what they're doing is they're essentially being complete and utter liars, and using this idea that this document and this spirit is really what was behind what we would call treason. I mean, this is what they've done. They've committed treason, and they're claiming that because of the love of the country and the love of the democratic process, right, and they would lose democracy, that democracy was being threatened. Well, first of all, this is not a democracy. It's a democratic republic, right? I mean, that's what it is. Ultimately, we are a republic. We're not a democracy. And a democracy gets much closer to socialism and communism. It doesn't have the various branches of so-called government. A true democracy would get rid of the Electoral College. The Electoral College is that one thing, for better or worse, that essentially keeps us from being mob rule and just importing and flooding hundreds of millions of people to change the voter rules and tilt an election without the final check and balance and system. And this is what it is. but that's not how they see it. And I've seen this again and again and again now. These people are waving their flags and quoting how great America is and what, you know, and they're doing all this because they had to. They had to step forward in order to preserve this thing. No, they're doing this and they're stepping forward because they want to preserve their hegemonic overthrow of the United States government and the people. This is what they're preserving. And in the whole idea of a false flag, just to let you know, right? The whole idea of a false flag, again, is that when there were ships at sea and they would have one flag, let's say it was a pirate ship, and they were flying the flag of France. And they have a bunch of flags kind of ready to go and hoist them up the mast line, right? And they see a ship and they go, oh yeah, that's a French ship. Hoist the French flag. French flag goes up. The French get their little telescope and then they say, oh, hey, it's one of us. And so they let their guard down and they get closer and closer and closer. And as they get within cannon distance, all of a sudden, the other ship, down goes the French flag, up goes the skull and bones, and boom, out go the cannonballs. That's a false flag. What these people are doing is they're running a false flag because they are falsely aligning themselves with ideals and principles that they believe are patriotic. And they're using them in order to fire their cannonballs. The difference between these people and the real pirates is that they're not going to tell you what their flag is before they start to jettison the cannonballs across the water and directly into your ship. Let's find out who these people are. Oh, we got Stanford University. Oh, good old Stanford. Good old Stanford. Home of Miss Blasey Ford in the Kavanaugh hearings. Home of Google. Stanford's brought us a lot of very wonderful gifts in the 20th and 21st century, which we've covered quite a bit. Professor Pamela Karlan, Harvard University's Professor Noah Feldman, and University of North Carolina Professor Michael Gerhardt. George Washington University, Jonathan Turley, picked by the Republicans. The legal experts interpreted the impeachment clause of the Constitution, which allows for presidents to be removed from office due to high crimes and misdemeanors. Professor Feldman testified the evidence clearly constitutes an impeachable offense. This is Mr. Feldman, because Mr. Trump's interactions with Ukraine show him corruptly using the powers of the presidency for political gain. Oh, really? Really? Okay. And here they are. These people are trying to figure out, well, what flags are they flying? What flags are they flying? And we have a redhead. It's like they're at the opera. She's like at the opera. Oh, this is the part where their heads get cut off. And then there's this piece of work. As she began her testimony, Professor Karlan scolded the committee's top Republican, saying she was insulted by his comment, implying that she had not reviewed the Intelligence Committee's testimony of 12 witnesses. Does that look like a dude? I'm sorry, that looks like a dude. I mean, just take the hair off here. Looks like a dude. Looks like Sam Rockwell. I would like to say to you, sir, that I read transcripts of every one of the witnesses, she said, but I read on those occasions, but everything I read on those occasions tells me that when President Trump demanded foreign involvement in our upcoming election, he struck at the very heart what makes this a republic. Oh, see, now she's quoting republic. Oh, they're getting hip to the game. We pledge allegiance. You see what they're doing? See what they're doing? This is total Alinsky. One of Saul Alinsky's rules to radicals is use their strength against them, right? So if the idea here that we're going to bank on this idea of the Republic and the Constitution and the framers and morality, some kind of morality that can be theoretically unimpeachable, right? So they have the unimpeachable morality versus the impeachable president. And that's what they're doing. And it's right out of Saul Alinsky. They're using their own weaknesses against them. Like they're going to use all these tools in which Americans are firmly believing that they're violating, they're grabbing and they're putting them on as their cloak. They're wearing the cloaks of patriotism, donning the robes of patriotism, personal rights and freedoms, and everything that's connected to them as it relates to the country. And then as soon as the trial's over, they'll take those robes off and they'll put other robes on, because this is who these people are, is what they do. And really what they are at the heart of all this is that they're communists. They're communists pretending to be so-called patriotic Americans. And this is how, remember I talked about this. Like if you want to be able to somehow influence change, you don't always go straight up against it. You kind of hit it asymmetrically. And these people have found their asymmetric angle. And their asymmetric angle is that they're going to show you that they're more American than you are. They're going to quote the Constitution. They're going to look at the Founding Fathers, chapter and verse. And they're going to channel them. That's their strategy. Because by doing that, they're showing you just how more American they are than you are. And then what they're really doing is they're saving the Republic. It's very clever. It's very clever, but we see right through it. We totally see through it. Mr. Trump has attacked the safeguards against establishing a monarchy in this country. Well, what president hasn't treated the presidency like a monarchy? Did Barack Obama run around like the most democratic president in modern history? He ran around like he was a potentate. He was his own monarch. The difference between Obama and Trump is that Obama got some flack and some friction, but nothing like Trump. And Obama had the communist socialist press on his side 24/7 with no doubt at all. The president's serious misconduct, including bribery, soliciting personal favor from a foreign leader in exchange for his exercise of power, and obstructing justice in Congress, are worse than the misconduct of any prior president. Are you kidding me? Including what previous presidents who faced impeachment have done or been accused of doing. This is such a tar and feather. And they set these people up as these so-called authorities. And then they come out and essentially try him in public. This is a trial right now. This is not the impeachment trial. This is the impeachment trial theoretically is going to happen. This is a hearing into the validity and the efficacy of impeachment, but there's a trial taking place. And of course, he's being tried in the court of public opinion by 3 onerous traitors. If what we're talking about here is not impeachable, nothing is impeachable yet. Oh, okay. So essentially what you're doing is you're also clearing the past for any other president whose name might be brought up and indicted on some form of impeachment charge, either directly or indirectly. I get it. You are mad. The president is mad. My Democratic friends are mad. My Republican friends are mad, he said. We are all mad. And where has it taken us? Will a slipshod impeachment make us less mad? We're only given an invitation for madness to follow us in every future administration. That's Turley. That's Turley. Professor Turley, who was chosen as a witness by Republicans, said he disagreed with Mr. Trump's conduct. But this is not how an American president should be impeached. He also warned that Democrats are setting a dangerous precedent. Of course they are, and they're not Democrats. These are social liberal Bolsheviks. These are the people who are in charge of the reset. That's who they are. They're in charge of the reset. And they did a complete reset with Russia. They did a complete reset with Western Europe. And they're doing a complete reset here in this country right now. This is what they're here to do. And they're cloaking themselves in the robes of the flag. And it's a blasphemy, to be honest with you. And it's a lie. And people are watching this, and they're getting more and more disenchanted as the lies become more and more egregious and harder to swallow. What does this guy say? For Americans nostalgic about their days in law school, perhaps wondering what it's like to sit through a professional lecture, Wednesday morning's impeachment hearings were a treat. Really? It was a treat? It was a treat for you. Turley was good. You could quote Turley as much as you want. These other clowns. Did you see what Carlin said about Barron Trump? I mean, these people are just totally arrogant, wise asses. And she sat there and said, well, we don't have a monarchy. You see, the difference between the democracy and the monarchy is that the king gets to do whatever he wants. And therefore, President Trump can turn his son into a baron and not just name his son Baron. Like, that's supposed to be funny? And that is supposed to be funny? And how long did she think about that? I mean, it was just, you could tell she was just so studied with this whole thing. And this is what we're getting here. These are the types of just mean-spirited people that are involved in this process. And then she had to apologize, and then she gave kind of a half-assed, sideways, backwards apology. People saw that too. And they're not winning any friends. They're not making as many converts as they think they're making. These people they're not as clever as they think. And they may be engaged in a level of distraction and obfuscation, and they've got, watch this hand while this hand does something else. And that, we know that this happens all the time. We know it happens all the time, but they're going all in now. Like, this is the all-in moment. There's no turning back from this moment in history, in the Trump presidency. And we have to have this moment. And there's no guarantee that the moment will turn out where these people are going to be flush, like adding a bunch of salt to, huge amounts of salt to a piece of pork and watching all the worms come out of the pork, right? I mean, there's no guarantee that that's going to happen. There's no guarantee. But this is where we are now. And there's no turning back. Trump today tweeted out, let's go. Let's have the impeachment. Like, the guy is pissed. But in a lot of ways, Trump has nobody to blame but himself for the predicament that he's in. And it's not an easy predicament to be in. Because if you're in the halls of power, if you're going to be in Washington, D.C., you have to attach yourself to power. That's how the game works. I mean, even here in Fredericksburg, with our little fluoride election, it became very clear to me who had the power in this town. It wasn't me. I mean, we had the truth, but we didn't have the power. Okay, and those are two different things. And eventually, the truth will win. But sometimes that's a marathon. And between the start of a marathon and the end of a marathon, there are legs of the race. And there are times when there are other people that are ahead of the race because they are burning everything that they have in order to get ahead. but they may not be there at the end because they burned all their resources and they burned all their energy to get there. But we didn't have the power here in this town. The dentists had the power. And they had the power because they had the organization. They had 13 dentist offices they were using every single day as a way to talk to people about the issues. They had the power because they were all together. They had the power because they had other groups and organizations like the newspaper, the Democratic Party on their side. So they, the power won out in that instance. It's the way it is. So I would say that the truth is on our side in the long run, but in the interim, it's not a given. And like I said, Trump has made his bed in a lot of ways because he had to attach himself to power. And who did he attach himself to in terms of power? Well, I'm gonna have a real adult conversation here. And if you look at essentially who are the most powerful entities in Washington, D.C., and in the corridor between Washington, D.C. and New York City, then you're talking about two very specific groups. One group I would say would be held down by AIPAC and JINSA, and really very strong traditional Jewish democratic power. They're very powerful. It's a liberal, democratic, powerful part of this government and a particular wing of the government. And you cannot deny it. I mean, you look at all three, with the exception of Turley, and again, I'm going to have a very just adult conversation here. Those three quote unquote constitutional lawyers, they're all Jewish. But I could find you, by the way, three other Jewish lawyers who would probably be more on the Zionistic, nationalistic side, who would take a different tack. Like I could throw Alan Dershowitz in there, who's on the other side of that equation, but he's still Jewish and he's still powerful. And so what Trump did is he aligned himself with Goldman Sachs and all the Goldman Sachs people because that's where the money was. He aligned himself with Sheldon Adelson and Paul Sanger. And by the way, Paul Sanger's in a bunch of trouble right now. And these are the people he aligned himself with. He aligned himself with Jared Kushner and Charles Kushner and Bibi Netanyahu. Bibi Netanyahu's in trouble now. He's going through his own coup process in Israel. So that's the side that Trump aligned himself with. On the other side, you've got the Nadlers, you've got the Schiffs, you've got the other guy, I forget his name now. You could throw Pelosi in there, even though technically she's not part of the quote unquote Democratic. Charles Schumer, by the way, you haven't heard much from Schumer lately, quote unquote Democratic Jewish power, but it's there and it exists. And we have to just, bring it to the surface, just like there's Republican Jewish power, but they're different and they have different kinds of goals and agendas. One tends to be more nationalistic, right? One tends to be, more quote unquote Zionistic. The other tends to be more liberal and socialistic. And these are the two kinds of dichotomies that we find ourselves sort of being stuck in the middle with. And both of them tend to be false realities. And I was watching Tucker Carlson last night, and he was calling this Paul Singer guy out because apparently Paul Singer totally screwed Cabela's over. And there's a town, I need to go into this a bit more. Paul Singer is a dangerous guy. He's a really dangerous guy because he's a hedge fund guy. And his hedge fund is supposedly conservative and Republican, but it's not. Paul Singer's a guy that is just interested in control and money and power, and as much as he can get. Okay, he's no different than the sole remaining Koch brother or George Soros. They're born out of the same sort of mold. These guys they're all robber barons. And they're all robber barons with this idea that they're going to do everything in their power to increase their power, their foothold, their footprint, and basically run the show here and win the fucking game. That's all they care about. They don't care about people. They feign that they care about people, but it's all about control. And so we have these two systems involved. It's the same thing that happened during World War II. On the one hand, we had the communists that were being run by Stalin. And on the other side, we had the social democrats run by Hitler. It was the same deal. They didn't care who was going to win, because ultimately one arm was going to win out, and there was going to be one organizing principle. And so that's where we're at now. And a lot of people don't understand that. And so Trump's problem, and you can even, I'm not telling you anything that isn't common knowledge. Go watch a Steve Pachinik YouTube video. It's exactly what Pachinik is talking about. And Pachinik is Jewish. I don't always know where Dr. Steve is on his positions, but he is clearly not afraid to address the topic and address the situation. And he says that Trump surrounded himself with all the wrong people. And he's basically said, look, these are the people you need. Look at these people. Fire Mike Pence. Make Rand Paul your vice president. Bring in John Huntsman. Get Mitt Romney off your back. Steve Pachinik should actually be working for Trump. That guy should be on, maybe he is, I don't know. Maybe he's got this little YouTube channel just as a form of cover, which would be smart to claim that he's really not working for Trump, because this is how, it's all cloak and dagger. We live in a cloak and dagger society, in a cloak and dagger world. But if he's not, though, he should be, because he's probably and I'm not even sure I trust him, but he speaks truth to power. And we're in a very interesting time. Very interesting time. There's no going back here now. Trump has said, bring it on. Bring it on. Let's have the trial. So this could get really, really ugly. Because if it gets to the Senate, then the Senate gets to make the rules. Now, the Senate is filled with people like Lindsey Graham, Mitt Romney. These are people that do not like Trump. So they can make his life very difficult for him. But there are other people inside the Senate that are not, cut from that mold. Now, it'll be very interesting, because the Democrats are going to have to have a vote, and they're going to have to vote for impeachment. Now, let's play this out in kind of a linear fashion. Let's say we are going to have an election in 2020. And let's say Democrats have voted for impeachment in the House. And let's say the impeachment thing doesn't work, and Trump is not impeached, doesn't step down. Then what's going to happen to those Democrats that voted for impeachment in those districts? You can redistrict, and you can flood as many people into their districts as you want. But the fact of the matter is that the public opinion could be so excoriating that they may not be able to withstand that in order to get through an election and have the election results get rigged. Because we just saw something in the court of public opinion that proved that when somebody is, how do I say this? When somebody has their clothes stripped away, their fine outer garments stripped away, we get to see them for who they are, and they're not very impressive. And I'm speaking primarily about Kamala Harris. And Kamala Harris thought she was the bee's knees, cat's pajamas. You ever see cats in pajamas? Maybe I should get some pajamas for Jasper and Rosie for Christmas. Anyway, if you saw what happened with her when she entered the election or the primaries, she was so convinced she was going to win. She was going to win. She had the pedigree. She was woman of color, came from California, was tight with the Obamas. She had that kind of, wokey woke cred. She listened to the right people when she was high, even though she got the times totally mixed up, messed up. she was so, captain of the debate team, and oh man, she was just gonna, and she got right in there. And the first thing she did was take on old Joe and make an example out of old Joe. And she did. It was mean spirited, but it was like, well, that's politics, right? And here came Tulsi Gabbard. She didn't even know what hit her, man. Tulsi was a stealth. Tulsi was like she was Delta Force. And I don't really trust Tulsi Gabbard either. I'm not here to extol the virtues of Tulsi Gabbard, but she did what she had to do. She essentially went up right next to Kamala Harris, pulled out a dagger, and she slit her political throat. That's what happened. Kamala Harris couldn't stop the bleeding. And this is what happened. What came out was excoriating. She couldn't stand the heat. Could not stand the heat. So she's out. And it happens. So I'm using that as an example so that if indeed somebody who's Democrat and they vote for impeachment and this thing falls flat, this is an all-in. This is why I'm saying this is an all-in or nothing moment. And you could say, well, the game is all rigged or whatever. And I would agree, but they still have to go through this process and people still have to get elected. And if it was all rigged, then Kamala Harris theoretically would be one of the crown jewels of the rigging process. You don't think she thought she was going to be the next president of the United States? Of course she did. She was convinced she was. So do you think some people are convinced that just because they have a certain demographic in their neighborhood, that's just going to be rubber stamped in their demographic because they happen to be Democrat? You wait and see. This could have, we talk about this Trump derangement syndrome, and on the show that I did with Jay last week, we talked about how when somebody comes out and really takes on Trump, there's almost this supernatural reversal effect that takes place. And it's happened consistently. You don't think some of these people aren't aware of that by now? Oh, they are. They are. Now, their handlers are going to press down on their buttons, say, you got to vote this way no matter what, and they'll do it. But they may be committing political suicide as a result of this. So just remember, they're going to have to go through this process and people are going to have to vote. And that vote's going to be a public record. And not all these votes will be voted with a very clear conscience. I can assure you. I can assure you. But this is where it's going to go, and we're going to be even more divided. And when this comes out in the Senate, we're going to be dealing with even more high crimes and misdemeanors, and it's going to get very ugly. You're going to people like John Bolton probably being paraded out there. So this is not over by any stretch, but it needs to be. And again, just for the sake of getting this done and out of the way, it's got to happen. For better or worse, it has to happen. And the worst part would be just the continued shit show that people are noticing, and it getting more and more just egregious, litigious, illegal, and what's the word I'm looking for? Immoral, right? We just see more of that. That'll come out, and that's going to turn more people's heads. It's going to turn more people inside out. Now, I had a really interesting conversation with Michael, who's shows up in the chat room and good friend of the show. Michael and I hung out in California. We had a burger in California on Monday night, and Michael's a total great guy, one of my favorite people. And we were talking about 9/11 and how, in the interim, how difficult 9/11 was for people that knew what was going on. And I knew what was going on. I had to untangle the players and I had to get into the weeds around it. But when 9/11 happened, I knew it wasn't what they were going to sell us, because I'd already had 10 years of going down the rabbit hole. I knew about Bush. I knew about his father. It did not surprise me at all. And everything that happened post 9/11, I had a really difficult time with, because of how people were just snookered, hook, line, and sinker. And we talked about that. And yet, it also served a purpose to wake people up. You know, that's the long-term effect of 9/11. And I made this analogy, and it's kind of an interesting analogy or an interesting connection, which I hadn't made until I was talking with Michael on Monday night. And it has to do with fluoride and San Marcos. Like San Marcos would not have fluoridated water if it wasn't for 9/11. And I wanted to bring this up because it gets into this idea of chaos theory, in that when one thing happens, it sets off a series of other events in people's lives. And that when a butterfly flaps its wings, theoretically in China, there's a storm off the coast of Africa, that sort of deal. So when 9/11 happened, it eventually led to San Marcos not having fluoridated water. Well, how did that happen? I'll tell you how it happened, because I know the story. You know, Sam Brannan was the point person for having San Marcos have unfluoridated water. Like San Marcos would not have unfluoridated water without Sam Brannan. I'm sorry. That's just the way it is. And Sam was kind of a dyed-in-the-wool liberal, progressive liberal. And then 9/11 happened, and it hit him, and it woke him up. And what happened was he dropped out. He dropped out of corporate America. He was doing really well. He had a 6-figure job. He had the life, right? He dropped out and traveled around the world, and he got red pilled. And when he got back to Texas, he settled in San Marcos, and he said, well, what can I do? How can I be involved? How can I make my world a better place? And that's when he ran across some of the fluoride people, or the anti-fluoride people. And then he started to, look at the facts around fluoride. And he was like, this is poison. This is a neurotoxin. And he got involved. And it was through his dedication and commitment, the 2 years of his life that he put into that San Marcos, Buto, and Kyle are non-fluoridated. They have non-fluoridated water. And that doesn't happen if 9/11 doesn't happen. You see what I'm talking about? So you can make a connection between lack of fluoridation being stopped in 9/11. So we can make a connection now with what's taking place with these so-called impeachment hearings, and then what will take place down the road as a result of this. You understand what I'm talking about? And it's very hard sometimes to see that in present time. But trust me, these things do happen, and they do work. And let me give you an example. I'm going to give you a concrete example as to what I'm talking about and how we cannot underestimate the power of truth. So Susan Wojcicki, who is the head of YouTube, had a big interview on 60 Minutes the other night. And something interesting came out of that interview, and I'm going to share it with you. This is from cryptagon.com. And the story is Google has 10,000 employees censoring YouTube videos, some of them starting to believe conspiracy theories. Think about that. Google has deployed 10,000 people to go through all these videos on YouTube. And these people are human, and they're watching these videos, and they're having to wrestle with their conscience. Because not all these 10,000 people are soulless. Some of these 10,000 people have souls, and their souls are being affected by what they're seeing. And now all of a sudden they're like, holy shit, this person's making total sense. This person's making total sense. And they see it over and over again. The evidence is compelling. The people are being truthful, non-judgmental, matter of fact, work through a lot of their hype and bullshit and aggression. And now these people are just dealing with what's being presented to them, and it's altering their ability to censor. This is interesting. I'm going to read this. YouTube CEO Susan Wojcicki tells Leslie Stahl what the video platform is doing about hate speech in an interview Sunday on the CBS News magazine program 60 Minutes. Wojcicki told 60 Minutes that Google employs 10,000 people to focus on controversial content. She described their schedule, which includes time for therapy. Can you believe this? They have to get therapy. They have to be reprogrammed, essentially, is what she's saying. Stahl also said the reports that the Monitor is beginning to buy the conspiracy theories. The only reason they're buying them is because they're starting to see the light of day, and the truth is starting to seep through their bullshit and their programming. Leslie Stahl, I'm told that it is very stressful to be looking at these questionable videos all the time. Oh yeah, you think it's stressful to have to deal with things like pedophilia, child sacrifice, child trafficking? You think it's a little bit stressful? Do you think it's stressful to think about there was a conspiracy on 9/11, 2001 to kill thousands of innocent people? Do you think that that's just a little bit stressful? Of course, and it's supposed to be stressful, by the way. And that there's actually counselors to make sure that there aren't mental problems with the people who are doing this work. Because you know what's going to happen? If you get the counselors involved and they're trying to counsel people in a way that they're continually reframing their mindset so they can continue to ban these videos, these people who are wrestling with their conscience and having moments of truth, they're going to have massive breakdowns. They're not going to be able to handle what's going to come to them, because these counselors are like Band-Aids. That's all they are. They're just Band-Aids. And they may be able to get them on track again for maybe another week or two, but eventually those people are going to quit, or they're going to have to be replaced, and they'll either be replaced by an algorithm that has less human vulnerabilities, or they'll be replaced by somebody who's less than human, whatever that is, and good luck finding them. They're probably already in Washington, by the way. So Susan says, it's a very important area for us. We try to do everything we can to make sure it's a good work environment. Our reviewers work 5 hours of the 8 hours reviewing videos. They have the opportunity to take a break whenever they want. I also heard that these monitors, reviewers, sometimes they're beginning to buy the conspiracy theories. I've definitely heard about that. And we work really hard with all reviews to make sure that, you know, we're providing the right services for them. Probably including the right drugs, by the way. Probably including the right drugs. You know, they probably have people that are clinical psychiatrists that can prescribe meds. They say, well, you know, a little Zoloft might actually be able to help you with some of this anxiety you're feeling, you know. Shutting down. But this is how the truth works, right? It seeps through. It is truth in its best form is entirely corrosive until it gets to where it needs to be. And then it becomes a different state, right? So the truth theoretically in its best kind of expression, it's corrosive. Just corrodes everything that stands between it. And once it gets to its place and where it needs to be, it has a state change. And it becomes mana, and the thing that feeds us. That's really the best kind of way that truth can almost be this shape-shifting kind of quality, or shape-shifting kind of essence in a lot of ways. So we're here, we're in it, right? We're in it. And I'll tell you how far this truth thing is going right now. right? It's like it's cutting through some of the gunkiest, greasiest crap that's accumulated in our pipes. So I watch True News, Rick Wiles, Doc Burkhart. Doc cracks me up. I think he's very funny. Rick is actually very funny too. Although there's actually also a very serious side of Rick Wiles. But they're interesting people. You know, they had this other guy. He was out, you know, they go around the world and they go to these, they get high level press passes to NATO and G20 and G8 and Davos. I mean, they cover at a pretty high level. I mean, that's the one thing that really surprises me about True News is that they're connected. They can get into these places. Anyway, Rick Wiles did a video about 2 weeks ago where he was calling out everybody that was, you know, going after Trump. And he basically said, and this is Rick's quotes, these are Rick's quotes now, right? That what Trump is dealing with is a Jewish conspiracy. Because he looked at all the players who were involved in trying to impeach Trump. It wasn't like he was, you know, having to really go after, you know, make a real reach around who the quote unquote impeachment team was and what their religious faith or affiliation was. But Rick also makes a distinction between the left and the right and the kind of the Zionist, nationalist kind of vibe and that side and the other side, which tends to be liberal, progressive, and socialist. And it's clear. If you can't see it, then, you know, stick around and let the truth serum kind of work through your system a bit. You'll get there. And once you get through kind of the prejudice and the bias and the political correctness, you can just see it for what it is. You can see it for what it is. And that doesn't mean that there aren't people, you know, there are plenty of people who are quote unquote Jewish, right? Who are invested in the truth, whatever that is. And there are people who are not quote unquote Jewish who are fucking nuts and out to lunch. And they're as completely delusional and dangerous as anybody who, you know, might fly the blue star of David, right? I mean, it doesn't really matter. This is what I'm trying to say, that ultimately, if you are invested in the truth, it won't matter what religion or what creed or what political alliance you have emerged out of and through. It will find its way and it will become a part of your life. And then you'll have to look at who you are, what your affiliations are, and where your groups are. And you're going to have to make a choice. Do I stay here in the fold because it's comfortable, but I look around and these people are completely lying. They're completely being disingenuous. They're lying to themselves, they're lying to others, and they're all lying in order to keep the group lie together and all feel better, more comfortable, and safer. Or do I venture outside of the group? Because I know that I can't be a part of that. And some people will stay there for a while and they'll be in that uncomfortable kind of edge for a while until they can't take it anymore. And then they'll either have a breakdown or they'll have a breakaway or a breakthrough. And what's happening is this stuff is just coming up. It's coming up. And so Rick talked about it and he got that show taken off of YouTube, of course. What if one of these YouTube reviewers saw that show and they're like, holy smokes, you know, he's right here. That person's never going to have the same reaction to material that they're going to witness. It's just the truth. And YouTube's probably going to watch this video too. So then, of course, everybody, all these people went after Rick. But you know who didn't go after Rick was Michael Savage. Michael Weiner, who also happens to be so-called Jewish. And he actually, which was kind of interesting because he said he would never go to Rick's show or support. Well, why not? Why wouldn't you go there? Why wouldn't you go to see if somebody was actually telling the truth? And if they weren't telling the truth, wouldn't you use your powers as somebody in the media who could cast a light or shine a light upon that person? and show them to be, disingenuous, dangerous. Why wouldn't you do that? But he made it very clear, I'm not going to go there. But what he did say is that he has the right to, and he also said that based on what he read about what Rick said, Rick is not wrong. Okay, he said he's not wrong. So now you've got somebody who's, definitely from, like, Michael used to be a liberal too. And then he came out on kind of the rights. I used to live in the Bay Area. I used to listen to Michael Savage, and he's interesting. He's funny. He's very smart. He's a nutritionist. His son started Rockstar energy drinks. Mom's a CEO or something like that. Anyway, but he didn't come right out and support Rick. But what he did support was he did support Rick's quest for the truth and being able to just speak to it. But now we can't even speak to it anymore. Now it's like, oh wow, we're gonna start to ban certain words. We're gonna ban certain words. We're gonna ban certain aspects or elements of speech. Let me give you another example. Coming from the world of sports, and this just happened yesterday. There's a guy named Tim Ryan, and he is a broadcaster for the 49ers. He does a radio broadcast, played at USC. Tim is a guy, did a lot of color for CBS Sports on their regional broadcasts for both college and pro football. And he's not a bad guy. He's not a mean guy. He's been doing this for a long time. And you usually know people by what they say, what they share. They'll let it out. They can't hide it. The person is a quote unquote real racist. You'll find out. Doesn't take very long. If a person is a complete and utter sexist, you'll find out. If they're hateful, you'll find out. They can continue sort of doing their thing but eventually it comes out, because that's the way the truth is. That's the way it is, right? So Tim Ryan has not had any history of being a so-called racist. You would know, because people, it's like there's the public person, and on the side they can have all these conversations, and people say, "Oh man, Tim Ryan. Well, he says one thing in front of the world. He has a whole nother kind of universe for other people." It hasn't come out. He's been doing this for a long time. And he was talking about Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson plays quarterback for the Baltimore Ravens. And one of the things that's made Lamar Jackson such a successful quarterback is he practices something called the read option. And on the read option, the running back gets the ball. Quarterback is going to pretend, or he's going to hand off to the running back. And if the running back gets the ball, then everybody converges on the running back and they tackle him. But if the running back doesn't get the ball, that means the quarterback still has the ball. And if he's really good at faking people out, they'll go for the running back. And meanwhile, Lamar Jackson runs about a 4.4 40, and he's off to the races. And before they can realize that guy doesn't have the ball, that guy's down the field. He's 10 to 15 yards and has been very effective. And Tim Ryan essentially made a comment that one of the reasons why Lamar Jackson is so effective at this is he's really good at disguising where the football is. Well, why is that? Well, first of all, the Ravens wear very dark uniforms, either dark purple or black uniforms. The football, you have to remember, is dark brown, okay? And he also said that Lamar Jackson has very dark skin, which allows him also to have better camouflage with the football. Look, you see my skin? If I had a brown football, you would have contrast. You'd say, oh, that guy right there has got the football. Go get him. With Lamar Jackson, it's just not as easy to see. And Tim Ryan was just stating the obvious. It's kind of like, hey, the reason why this guy is so successful when he catches the ball, oh, he happens to be 6'8". He's really tall. So when somebody tries to go up and get it, He just jumps about 3 inches higher, and there's nobody that can get the ball. He's making a physical observation. He's making a physical observation that because Lamar Jackson's skin tone is very dark, with a dark uniform and a dark ball, it's hard to find the damn ball. Guess what? He got suspended for 1 game. 1 fucking game. Oh, geez. Wow. Sanford, it's just like, really, this is a really hard team to like now. It's like 1 game. What are they going to do? Are they going to take him down to Google? I mean, they're pretty close. Maybe he could have a meeting with one of Susan Wojnicki's counselors. I could just see Jed York get on the phone with, hey, Suze, it's Jed. Yeah. I know you heard about Tim, right? Oh, man. Can we get him some counseling time? Who's your best? Yeah, I want to sit down. I want him to sit down with them. He needs to just, he needs to get reminded, kind of what the appropriate thing to say and do is. Okay, can you handle that? I got some tickets for you, by the way. You can come up in the press. Well, you can't come in the press box, be too obvious, but I got some tickets for you on Sunday. How's that sound? Does that sound good? Thanks, appreciate it. I mean, is that what's going to happen? Send them over to Google? 1 game. If you're Tim Ryan, like, what are you thinking? If I'm Tim Ryan, I'm not coming back. I'm just not coming back. And it's like he's supposed to apologize and all this bullshit. If you talk to Lamar Jackson, he'd probably say, yeah, damn right. I'm dark, the ball's dark, I take advantage of it. He's probably have, it's going to be interesting to see what Jason Whitlock has to say. But this is just another example. If I'm Tim Ryan, I'm like, see, I don't want your job. I don't want your job. You're ridiculous. Kiss my ass. It's just, it's like these people who are the thought police, they have to see what they're doing in a very different kind of light. It's almost as bad as supporting Colin Kaepernick. Oh, I forgot they did support Colin Kaepernick. Go figure. All right, let me see what you guys are what you're talking about in the chat room. I've been ranting for a while. Let's see what's happening. Got 84 people watching now. All right, let's see. But the truth was removed. How do we deal with this? Sleight of hand, get it slight, reprogramming, the rapist, reset compliments of Google, kind of proves election is electricity votes or volts. Interesting. I listened to him back in the day. Let's see, what else do we have? It's like salt. Love your optimism, Robert. One or another, we hold to be true. It's what I call the third quay. Actually, there's some sort of super. I agree, Uncle Glenn. I do agree. There's something about the whole Trump thing that is mind blowing, and that there is this kind of, I don't know, Holy Ghost. I don't know what you want to call it, but it's amazing how many people have come out and aggressively gone after Trump. I read something which was interesting, right? It was interesting in that, what was it? That Trump, in some ways, is as crucified and vilified, theoretically, as Christ. I thought about that. That actually makes sense in a lot of ways. It makes a lot of sense. And I think we're seeing exactly what took place during the time of Sananda, where there was this inquisition, which eventually led to the crucifixion. And whether you buy into that story or not, right, the elements of that story are present here and now. That's exactly what we're seeing. We're essentially seeing the Sanhedrin in effect. And I'm not saying that Trump is Jesus, but there are parallels here that we can form from this. Interesting, right? All right, let's see what else we have here. What else? Obama was sneaky about it. He totally was. He was totally sneaky. Miranda says, I was at Barnes and Noble yesterday and they practically had a shrine set up to Obama. Yeah, of course. Has anyone seen Michelle dance on Ellen? A lot was revealed. You mean Michael? Michael's packing, right? Michael's packing for sure. And let's see, what else? Anything else? Truth is like raising children. At first they don't listen because they know it all. Then they fight you and then most eventually thank you. It's true. It's, spot on, Steve. It's true. That's, but now it's kind of, it's like it's been, the veil has been rended, right? The veil has been rended. So now it's seeping into the system and you ultimately cannot be denied. And when we get to a point now, this is crucial. When we get to a point where those three supposed constitutional scholars are donning the cloaks of patriotism, you know that we're close. You know that we're close to something because that's the last resort. Well, the last resort is just an out and out lockdown of the system, but that's the last resort, that they're putting on these garments in order to trick people and to create the illusion that they're being patriotic and that they really have the country and the Constitution and all these things at heart, where in actuality, they're just out and out liars willing to put on any mask. And when they do that, it's actually showing and illustrating just how much of an illusion that they're participating in. So it's kind of like it's almost like the last resort. So bring it on, pretend, use the buzzwords, framers, founders, Jefferson, Madison, Washington, name check all you want. It's not going to help. It's not going to help because it rings hollow. It rings hollow. It just does. It's like people in church, and I'm not a church guy, and I'm not even a scripture guy. It'd be like people that read scripture and there's no spirit. It's just hollow. I mean, they're quoting chapter and verse, and they're doing it because it makes them sound better, or it somehow aligns them with something, right? Anyway, I got to go. What is this? Okay. All right. I'm out of here. I'll talk with you guys. I got a client. Thank you for being part of today's show. Use your head to discern what's real, your heart to simply what's possible. I'm Robert Phoenix. You're you. And I'll be back tomorrow with the Friday forecast. See you later.